Real Estate Pro Talk is a live radio talk show dedicated to educating its listeners on the entire spectrum of real estate matters. Part of the American dream is owning a home or investment property, or perhaps even becoming a real estate agent yourself. Paul Vanas and his team of real estate professionals have over 250 combined years of experience in the industry. In other words, we can make it happen for you. Why go down the road less traveled when we can put you directly on the real estate superhighway? Whether buying or selling in today's complicated real estate market, or if you just need advice about jumping into the real estate business for a career change, you'll need a decisive edge based on experience. Call Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144 for a free, no-obligation consultation. That's Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Vanas, and welcome to Real Estate Pro Talk. This is a real estate-oriented program which will cover a variety of topics every Friday afternoon between 3 and 4 p.m. here on WOON Radio. Some of the topics we'll be talking about during our time together is how to buy and sell a home, how to choose a mortgage broker, staging a home for sale, home inspections, and a whole lot more. I've been in the real estate business coming up on 40 years now, of which I own a real estate brokerage company, a real estate school, and a land development company. All of the knowledge that we're going to try to impart on you today is based on the continuing education classes that I teach licensed real estate brokers and agents, along with my personal experience and those of our expert guests. The goal in doing this is so you'll have the information in hand when you need a seasoned real estate professional. You're welcome to call us today at 766-1240 and ask any question on the subjects we'll be discussing, or you can call me on my personal cell phone after the show at 401-265-6144. And of course, every week this show gets replayed on Saturday morning at 9 a.m. in case you miss any or all of the show. And later on it gets uploaded onto YouTube, so you can listen at your convenience at any time. All you have to do is go over to YouTube and put in Real Estate Pro Talk in the search box, and all of our episodes will come up, and you can play them at random. Our guest consultant today is Fire Marshal from the North Smithfield Fire Department, Brian Gartland. Hello, Brian. Welcome.
Hi, Paul. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Glad you can come today, and I'm glad you came, Brian, because I've been wanting to get someone from the fire service to, come in and talk about, because, we, as over the years, the fire laws have gotten more stringent, and for a good reason, to save lives. And smoke detectors and carbon monoxides and detectors and all of these things. When you buy a house now, you have to have it inspected and so on and so forth. But before we get into all of that, I always like to ask someone, how the heck did you become a firefighter? Was this something you dreamed of when you were a little kid, or how did it happen?
Well, Paul, thanks for having me. First off, yeah, that's pretty much how it goes. I was exposed to the fire service pretty young back in Burrillville, where my father was a volunteer for like 50 years. But when I was a kid, he used to take me down there, and I got to see all the lights and the fire trucks, and kind of fell in love with it and went with it.
Wow. What kid doesn't want to be a firefighter when they're 5 or 6 years old? We used to have the hook and ladder go by my house when I was a kid, and I always wanted to be the guy on the back.
Yeah.
What do they call that? A tiller? Is that a?
Yeah, the tiller ladder.
Right. I always wanted to be the guy on the back steering the thing around the corners, because it looked like he was having a ball.
Yeah. We are pretty popular with the kids. Yeah.
That's great. Well, what does it take now? I mean, way back when, I actually applied to be a firefighter way back when in the 70s, and I know it was pretty stringent back then. I'm sure it's even more difficult now. What does it take to become a firefighter now?
Yeah, so, I mean, back in the 70s, one thing, it was certain there wasn't as many full-time paid jobs back then. There was a lot more volunteering back then. Obviously, it's evolved where communities, people got busier in their lives and weren't able to volunteer, so it evolved into a lot more paid services out there. Mm-hmm. We do still have volunteers out there also. But, yeah, the training got more difficult. It got more time-consuming, and that evolving to more certifications to do everything.
Really?
So that's what happened, I think, and that's been happening over the last 30 years or so. So you have a lot more paid service than volunteering. But yet, again, it starts with being an emergency medical technician and the fire academy to get your basic skills down, stuff like that. But
so does everybody have to become an EMT of sorts or trained in that before they become or as they're becoming a firefighter?
So it's up to the individual jurisdictions if you have to be an emergency medical technician. Also, most places, I know I can speak for most of Rhode Island just because I've been around, most of them like to see individuals become an emergency medical technician and get into the fire service. But there is definitely entry-level training that needs to be done before you can become a full-fledged firefighter.
And I'm sure with the technology today, it's a little different from back in the old days, right? I mean, it's
absolutely the technology. I mean, is leaps and bounds since the 70s, as you speak of. Yeah, and it keeps growing. Also, I mean,
really,
it's going so fast that just keeping up with the newest technology is a job in itself.
Now, do you have to, like, my business, I got to do continuing education every 2 years. Rhode Island real estate brokers and agents are required every 2 years to do 24 hours of continuing education. I'm sure you guys have to do the same, right, or something similar, right?
Absolutely. Whatever certification you have, most require continuing education throughout the years. For example, EMT, I think it's up to 40, 50 hours of continuing education every 2 or 3 years to maintain that certification. Yep.
Wow. So the EMTs, now, are there so many EMTs within a particular station, or are they, or am I confusing them with like the rescue squad guys? Are they the rescue squad guys automatically EMTs?
Not necessarily. I mean, some different terminology. It's different nationwide. In Rhode Island, we call an ambulance a rescue.
Okay.
There's not many states around that does that, but in the rescue trucks in other parts of the country is like specialty special hazards type of incidents they go to.
Right.
But ambulances or rescues, as we call it in Rhode Island, they usually travel with 2 personnel and at least a basic provider and an ALS provider. Okay. That's pretty much the norm statewide, but again, it varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
Yeah. I didn't notice the difference on that, which you just mentioned. So years ago, remember the old show Emergency that used to be on TV, and the 2 guys would show up, and they didn't have a truck with like a gurney in the back. They would just show up, in their regular truck with their equipment, and it was so different from, I guess that's California.
Yeah.
We were used to the rescue squad would come with the gurney in the back and the whole 9 yards, and I never realized that difference until I watched that show about 40 years ago.
Yeah.
That that there is a difference. So you started off as a volunteer, right, at one time?
I did, yes, in Burrillville.
Wow. So what's the difference primarily of a volunteer station and a full-time station, other than the obvious? The volunteers are not there 24 hours a day, obviously, but are there any logistical differences between the two? Do they have, did the guys, the volunteers, I would think they're wearing some sort of communication beeper or a cell phone or something that says, hey, you're needed at XYZ address now? Is that the way it works?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, really the only difference is the volunteers aren't at the station when there's a call, as opposed to the career people with those folks will be at the fire station when a call comes in. But as far as training and education, it's pretty much across the board. You have to do the same stuff to get your certifications. There's no really difference with that. And again, I think that was where we go back to what we talked about before. It was making it hard for people that have full-time jobs to keep up with everything. Right. But yeah, that's pretty much the only difference, really.
Yeah. And I think that training is important, because the last thing you want is to have someone in your fire service get into a situation whereby they're ill-trained and all of a sudden there's something can happen to them. Obviously it's a dangerous business you're in.
Absolutely. And things we talk about and train on all the time is different jurisdictions coming to help other jurisdictions, and we want to make sure we're all on the same page. So it's important that we all have the same certifications and training, so we all can integrate together at incidents. Because let's face it, these incidents sometimes are so big for just one jurisdiction that you need to call in another community to help.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for those in the fire department. I have family members that are firefighters, and I really believe it takes a certain personality of a person to put on a suit and run into the building. I mean, that takes a certain, it goes against all of what nature has taught you to protect yourself. Goes against every, all of your DNA basically of a protection, but to do that every day, that's really remarkable. Let's talk about the North Smithfield Fire Department, where you're the fire marshal now. How many stations does the North Smithfield Fire Department have now?
North Smithfield has 2 stations, one on Providence Pike, which is our headquarters station, and one on St. Paul Street.
I see. Providence Pike, is that still the Primrose? Is that, we used to call it Primrose, is that?
Primrose, yes. It's still the, I guess you could say, the Primrose station.
Okay.
But we evolved into one department, which is North Smithfield Fire and Rescue Service.
Okay, so it's not broken up into little quadrants anymore. Okay.
No.
I see. Wow. So the stations, there's 2 basic stations now that cover the town. Now, are those manned full-time?
Yes, both stations have people in it around the clock, unless there's a call.
Yeah.
But we have 3 firefighters at the Providence Pike station, and we have 2 firefighters staffed at the St. Paul Street station.
I see. And your office, are you out of the Providence Pike, or are you out of the St. Paul? Like, where if someone wants to contact the fire marshal, where do they go?
Yes, I'm out of St. Paul Street station is my office.
I see. So the personnel, I mean, how many folks in the entire town? How many people are in the entire service? Do you know?
So we have 5 firefighters on staff, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and then we have the chief, who is located at the Providence Pike station, the deputy chief, who is at the St. Paul Street station, and then myself is over there. So during the day, Monday through Friday, we have an additional 3 personnel on top of the 5 that we have.
Wow.
And then we do have a dispatcher also on staff at the St. Paul Street station. That's 24 hours a day.
So is your dispatcher like other towns where they're kind of sharing with the police, or is it a separate dispatcher? Do you know?
North Smithfield, we have a separate dispatcher, part-time people. They staff the dispatch office.
I see.
Yep. So that's all they do is fire dispatch.
Good. That's great. Yeah, I know a lot of towns now are trying to merge. I think I read in the paper, is it Pawtucket and North Providence are going to merge dispatch, and boy, I don't know. A couple of good-sized towns. One's a city, obviously. That sounds like I don't know if that's a good idea. That's my personal view of it, but of course, somebody who's a heck of a lot smarter than me, has figured that out. But tell me about the fire marshal position. How does one become a fire marshal? How do you went from a regular firefighter in North Smithfield, and someday this job came up? And
yes, that's exactly what happened. I got hired in the fire department in 2002. Mm-hmm. Before that, I was working as one of the part-time dispatchers since 1998, but I got hired full-time in 2002. I did about 4 years as a responder on the trucks, and then the fire marshal position opened up, and I'll be honest with you, at the time, it was kind of strange, but nobody else wanted it, and I was a little young in my career to take it, but the chief appointed me to the position, and I've been there ever since. I'm going on 14 years now. So,
really?
Yes.
That's great. Now, you're essentially responsible for going in these buildings and making sure the buildings, because this is a real estate show, they adhere to fire codes and whatnot?
Yes. My job in North Smithfield, I handle inspecting residential, commercial. I do a plan review, any kind of developments, projects. And I also do fire investigations in the town, whether it's a criminal matter or if it's just an accidental fire or something. That's pretty much I do all, which is my favorite part of the job, is fire education, kind of like what we're doing here today.
I see.
I go out and teach the kids about fire safety. I go to the elderly complexes. Oh. I go to businesses upon request. I'll pretty much go. Anybody asks me to go talk to them about fire safety in North Smithfield, I can give you an earful.
Really? And I'm sure you have to show up and put your suit on every once in a while and work as a firefighter as well, right? So
I do. In North Smithfield, because we're small, we have situations that I have to, activate as a firefighter and start actively getting involved in these emergencies. Yep.
Really?
Which I love. It breaks up my day, keeps me fresh with my skills also in case I ever want to go back to the fire truck. Yep.
Wow. So are you ever involved in like the forensic stuff after the fact, where like the day after the fire, where they go in and, you kind of like the movie, I forget the movie there with the guy with the Robert De Niro with the knife, scraping the 2x4 to see what was used and what wasn't used. So are you involved in that as well?
I do fire investigation. I have a certification in that, and basically I'm on the first alarm to get there, and then I'm the last one to leave, and we try to make sense of what happened, and
right.
Some cases we can solve pretty quick, and some take a few years to do. But that used to be my favorite part of the job. But
really?
Like I told you before, my favorite part now is educating the people about fire safety. I think that we can save more people doing that than after the fact.
Right. I mean, I would think that's pretty involved, especially the whole science behind it. You have to, that must be a whole different education in fire safety, correct? Like the forensic stuff that you do after the fact. I mean, and I'm sure after a fire, there's some sort of pressure on you to get the correct answer, because I'm sure you have insurance companies and everybody else wants to know what really happened. Was it malicious? Was it a malicious intent, or was it just an accident, electrical fire, whatever? Is that so?
Absolutely, and that's another whole aspect of the job where continuing education is so important. Formal education. We use the scientific method to solve these fires. So a lot goes into the investigation aspect of it. We interview people, and we look for anything and everything that can help us solve those fires. Yep.
And of course, I would think there's a degree of politics sometimes that gets involved in it, right? For when people are looking for the answers, and it all depends what answer they want to hear.
People ask me that question sometimes, but I've been in the fire department. I've been 14 years as the fire marshal now, and politics really doesn't really play much of a role as far as putting pressure on anything when it comes to that stuff. Yeah, if it ever does, that's easy for me as the fire marshal to bring it up the chain of command to the chief at that point anyway.
Yeah, well, that's great.
Yep.
So the department, I have a note here. Do you know how many calls you guys get per year to keep these two stations going? Is it something where you're making a run, at least once a week or once every 2 weeks? What's the typical routine? And I'm sure you're covering a myriad of calls, not just fire calls, right?
That's correct. I mean, the fire service, as we talked about, has evolved over the years, and we're more of any kind of emergency service. And and I know it's an old joke, but the cat in the tree, to a raging house fire, we get those calls, everything in between. And people obviously call 911 because they lost control of the situation. So we cover a lot of different things. We do, for a general number, we're doing about 3,500 calls for service a year.
Wow.
And again, that covers everything from that cat in a tree to inspections and general emergencies. Yeah.
Wow. So that's almost 300 a month.
Yeah, it's a lot.
That's a lot.
It's getting busy
when you break that down. Do you find, and you just mentioned some, Brian, which I didn't even think of before, but 911, like I'd be embarrassed to call 911. To just say, I know a lot of people call you after a flood and they say, hey, I got water in my basement. What do I do? Can you guys pump me out or whatever? But I think there's a certain age group. I take my mother, for example. When my mother was, she was going through a serious medical issue one night, and she had me on the phone. I'm in Burrillville. She's in North Providence. And I said, well, Ma, call 411, 911. And she goes, well, I can't call 911. I don't want them over here and, with the lights flashing. And I said, well, Ma, that's what the system was designed for. She's embarrassed to call 911. Do you see any of that? Do you get people like that?
We absolutely do.
Yeah.
A lot of times people will call and say, I really need an ambulance. Can you put the lights off before you get here?
Right.
No sirens. It does happen. I mean, these people are at their worst time sometimes, and that's human nature for people to be embarrassed about that kind of stuff. But the firefighters we have, and I can speak for firefighters nationwide on this, I've met a lot of them. They're really good with making people feel comfortable.
I see.
And when they get there, they really can control the situation and calm the people down. But we do get that a lot.
Yeah, and I'm sure, and conversely, they must call you with stuff that's just off the wall too.
Yeah.
I get these videos my son sends me of these police calls, and a guy will call the police because the pizza guy didn't deliver his pizza on time. Something ridiculous, and the dispatcher is saying, not for anything, sir, but this really isn't our department. I mean, I'm sure you get those things as well, right?
Sometimes, and in Rhode Island, they have the enhanced 911.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times the 911 dispatchers that are out in Situate, before they transfer the call to us, they kind of weed that stuff out before it gets to us. But yeah, we've had a few situations like that over the past. But most of the time when someone calls 911, they need it. And that's why we don't judge, I mean, what is an emergency that we consider an emergency might not, we might not have the same view of what an emergency is, but when we get there, we pretty much know they lost control of the situation, and we're here to help. Whether it's going to be a something minor or something major, we're going to help them whatever they need.
So you just mentioned something, a call coming in from Situate. So North Smithfield, you're on that trunk, the RISCON, that Rhode Island, like some towns are not on the RISCON fire, or should I say emergency service, dispatch service. You North Smithfield is, right?
So how the system works, there's two different things. You're talking about the RISCON radio service, and then there's also 911. And in Rhode Island, anybody who calls 911, whether it's from their landline phone or a cell phone, goes to, I believe it's either Situate or North Situate, the state police barracks, where there's maybe half a dozen or a dozen dispatchers, or I should say call takers, answering.
And that's through the state.
Through the
that's
state.
The statewide system.
It goes right to them. Everything pops up on computer screens. They know where you are. They know everything. And that if you call in from Westerly to Woonsocket, that's how it works.
Okay.
They take the calls, and then they transfer them to the proper jurisdictions.
Okay.
So when we get the call, it's just by a telephone line, and we as dispatchers will ask the caller what the emergency is, what they need, and we dispatch the call from there. So it's kind of like a checks and balance system in Rhode Island. I don't know exactly how many states utilize that kind of system, but I know Rhode Island does. I think we've been compared to New Hampshire. I think they maybe do it. But it really is a good system.
You've seen an improvement when they switched over to that system years ago?
Absolutely. They did. I mean, I only know that system because I think they switched it over. I was probably a kid.
Yeah.
No, I think it works pretty well. We have some hiccups sometimes actually bordering Massachusetts where our cell phones will go to Mass, and that sometimes will cause a delay.
I see.
So Mass would then have to transfer it to Rhode Island, and then
Oh, that's a good point. So whatever cell tower is picking up the signal, okay, I never really gave that any thought. So if you're just over the line in Uxbridge and it thinks, the system thinks I'm calling from Mass, but I'm really calling from Rhode Island.
Yes,
that's when you have to clarify it.
It really is, and now where everybody's going to cell phones, there's good and bad to it.
Yep.
So if your house is on fire, obviously you want to get out. You grab your cell phone, or it's already on you, and you call 911. But if you're too close to the Mass line, you could hit a Mass tower and have a little bit delay.
I see.
But obviously, if there's no reason to leave your house, if it's some kind of a medical emergency, we always encourage people to call from their landline phone, because that's going to be automatic at 911, that they'll see exactly where you are.
Okay.
So if there's any problem with us getting there, if you can't talk or something. And they have also at 911 have people who can't hear or different things. They can work with the people. So
wow, that's great. Wow, This is great information. Let's do this. Let's take our first commercial break, and we will be right back with Fire Marshal Brian Gartland of the North Smithfield Fire Department. Sorry guys, I know you're listening, but it's the Fire Department.
Real Estate Pro Talk is a live radio talk show dedicated to educating its listeners on the entire spectrum of real estate matters. Part of the American dream is owning a home or investment property, or perhaps even becoming a real estate agent yourself. Paul Vanas and his team of real estate professionals have over 250 combined years of experience in the industry. In other words, we can make it happen for you. Why go down the road less traveled when we can put you directly on the real estate superhighway? Whether buying or selling in today's complicated real estate market, or if you just need advice about jumping into the real estate business for a career change, You'll need a decisive edge based on experience. Call Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144 for a free, no-obligation consultation. That's Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144.
And we are back. Welcome back to Real Estate Pro Talk on this beautiful Valentine's Day. I hope you remembered, Brian. Today's Valentine's Day. Do you remember?
Of course I remember.
We don't want to forget. Before we get it back to our interview, the first real estate tip of the week. You know, there's lots of little things you can do that for your house to make them more efficient. And one of them is to clean out those exhaust fans in your bathrooms. Those fans build up mold and mildew and all kinds of funky stuff that's up in there. Of course, you know, if you have the old-fashioned type of fans that blow into the attic, those are really not good. You should really pipe those fans outside through a vent in the eaves to get rid of that moisture. The last thing you want to do is put moisture up in your attic, because especially if the attic is not vented. Some of the old houses are not vented properly in the attic, and once you push that moisture up in the attic, you're really inviting a mold problem. But the fans in your bathrooms, really, you should take them apart maybe once or twice a year, and get up there with a vacuum cleaner and or a little Lysol or something to clean them. You'll also find if you clean the blades, an old timer gave me a trick years ago that if you use some Pledge on the blades in a bathroom fan, it really quiets the fan down quite a bit. And I started doing that, and it really does work. So think about that from a maintenance perspective. Okay, Brian, fire marshals now. Do fire marshals in each town basically have the same responsibilities? I mean, is that like a general blanket position where you both, the fire marshal in North Smithfield basically doing the same thing as the fire marshal in Lincoln and in Smithfield and everywhere else, to your knowledge?
Generally speaking, yes. Obviously, if jurisdictions are bigger, like Woonsocket's a lot bigger than North Smithfield, they have multiple fire marshals, or they'll have the top fire marshal and followed by some inspectors or different people. But, in North Smithfield, we have one fire marshal, and that's what I do. I cover every aspect of fire prevention.
I see.
What it's called in the fire service.
Oh. So the fire marshals, obviously the goal is to save lives. That's the mission of the fire marshal, and make sure these buildings comply. I know, especially, so we've had a couple of nasty fires in Rhode Island that have changed the fire codes. But what are the typical fire prevention rules associated with residential dwellings that you know of?
So in Rhode Island, we have a law that requires an inspection before the change of title, or before a house is sold. So the seller of the house is responsible to get a smoke detector certificate. Now, there are some exceptions. I won't go through all the exceptions, but if it requires a smoke inspection, the local jurisdiction fire marshal will go out and do the inspection and make sure that it complies with the current code. Current fire code.
So what does that include? So there's smoke detectors that go in a house, and there's the carbon monoxide detectors?
Yes, smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. And everything, when it comes to the residential, it's all about the year of the house that was built, or the home that was built, and whether it's a single family, a 2-family, 3-family, or even 4-family.
I see. So
there's a lot of rules out there when it comes to that, and it's all broken up by dates. For example, any home that was built in 1976 or before, everything's going to be required to be battery operated.
I see.
And then they go in certain locations, general rule outside of bedrooms, and on every living level of the house.
And these are the regular smoke detectors you could buy at the box stores or the hardware stores that you can, the white ones, right?
Yep.
And their battery, they have like a 9-volt battery in them or something.
They do. And once again, we talk about technology, is there are so many different versions of these detectors now. And before I forget, let me get out there that sometimes these people will buy smoke detectors online from certain websites, and they come from a different country.
Oh, really?
And they're not compliant with the rules of this country.
I hadn't heard that one before. That's
Yes.
a great point.
Yes, and I've been seeing it more and more. They're a lot cheaper to buy
Yep.
for obvious reasons. They're not tested, like listed and tested through insurance folks, and they are no good to install. And the fire marshals are out there looking at that,
I
and
see.
they'll actually fail the inspection if they do have some of those detectors.
So, but like a regular smoke detector has to meet a certain criteria in this country to be certified as approved, and I guess what the insurance companies want to make sure that these things are being used properly. But do you see many of people buying these bootleg type of detectors? Or
I do see it. I do see it probably more now, especially that the internet has got so big on. You can just buy stuff right
they go
right
on
online.
eBay?
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
And so we have been seeing it more and more. But for the most part, if you purchase these things in your local hardware stores, they will be compliant. Another big one in Rhode Island we get is the plugins.
Yep.
Plugins are not allowed any longer. They have to be battery operated and mounted.
Wow.
And I think a lot of people ask the question why, right?
Right.
And it's pretty simple, especially these houses that if you go back before the 70s, in the 70s and whether the 50s or whatever, they have so many plugs in a room. And if you plug in the CO detector in a room, the first thing the new people come do is they unplug it and they plug their light in because there's not enough plugs in the room.
Good point. Good point.
So I think now some of that's a guess if that's exactly what happened, but
Right.
that's some
But
of the things
that's
we saw.
reality.
That's
'cause
reality.
That's what I see in my business all the time. Yeah.
So they're no longer allowed. Now, they still will work. You can buy it afterwards and have extra if you want.
Right.
But to sell your house, they are required to be mounted.
So the detectors now, obviously, once that house gets inspected by you, so you can go to the closing and you have to provide a certificate, right? They have conformance of sorts, right? I mean, unfortunately, there's nothing stopping that person. Like you get the person who's always unplugging their smoke detector because it's near the kitchen or something, or they're frying bacon, and all of a sudden the thing goes off. And do you see much of that later on when you go in a house? Especially if there's a fire. Do you see any of them hanging down that should be plugged in that aren't plugged in?
We do. We see that a lot. Where I see it a lot is the apartment buildings where I have to inspect every year, every 2 years or so. And they have a commercial fire alarm system, but they also, in addition, they have the 110 type detectors in each individual dwelling unit. And I see a lot of these apartments that have the bedrooms off the kitchen, and yes, they are taken down because the person, it becomes a nuisance.
Right.
So what we do to try to solve that issue is, especially in new construction or in situations where we can change it, is we wall mount them.
Okay.
So you're allowed to wall mount a detector as long as it's not more than 12 inches from the ceiling.
Okay.
But it has to be more than 4 inches. So from the top of the ceiling, it's going to be, you go down 4 inches, but not more than 12. You can put the detector there.
I see.
And that will help with false alarms in a kitchen.
Really?
But you still want to have the smoke alarm outside of the bedroom.
Yep.
When your door is closed and you're sleeping at night. There was a time that there was arguments in the business where they said, well, no, just put it inside the room. But that won't help you if your door's closed and there's a fire outside, and then by that time it could be too late. So we try to curb that situation by doing that.
I see. Now, what's the difference between like a smoke detector and a carbon monoxide detector? Do they have to be the same? Do they have to meet the same criteria for height off the floor and whatnot?
Yes. So carbon monoxide smoke alarms, they pretty much go the same places. It's all about a warning to the individual sleeping. I mean, smoke alarms and carbon monoxide detectors are really for people who are sleeping.
Right.
I mean, if you're awake, well, I shouldn't say that, carbon monoxide, that's the only way it gets detected. But if you're in a house and there's a fire breaks out and you're awake, you're going to know it just by seeing the smoke or smelling the smoke. So really, they're for people who are sleeping. And I just want to get that message across because some people think it's crazy to put so many in a house, nowadays. But we can talk about that if you want to.
It's I think of that family. Years ago when I started in the real estate business, there was an immigrant family who bought a house in Providence, and this was you were probably a little kid at the time, so I don't expect you to know this story because I'm a few years older than you. But I was devastated. There was a family that bought a house in Providence, and they had a gas-on-gas heater, and it was a very, very cold winter. and for some reason they didn't know that you shouldn't take the pipe out of the wall and turn it into the house. They literally took the stack from coming out of the back of the gas stove and pointed it into the kitchen to get more heat. And I think there was 6 or 7 people perished, and it was just god awful from the carbon monoxide.
Yeah, it is. That's why those detectors are so important. Carbon monoxide is a colorless, odorless, tasteless gas, and you don't know. The only way to know it's there is that detector.
Yeah.
And I will say we get a lot of these calls for carbon monoxide, and a lot of it is misfiring furnaces and backups of fireplaces and the chimney flues and clogged. And I will tell you that, and you don't read about them in the paper or you don't see it on the news, but those are absolutely saving lives all the time.
Really?
And I think even sometimes the people don't realize it too, that what could have happened if they weren't there. So yeah, those are so important. The more the better inside houses.
I agree. What happened to me a couple of years ago, we had a power outage in Lincoln, and I have a generator, and I dig the generator out, and I put the generator, and I didn't realize that I usually have the generator like about 4 feet from the house, and I usually have the exhaust pointing out. And for some reason, I was in a hurry to get to work. My wife was home, so I hooked up the generator, hooked up the wires, I threw the breakers, and I did all this stuff. And I didn't realize that I had the exhaust pointing towards the house. And, it was amazing. It was a pretty windy day. I mean, and my wife called me about an hour later. She said the carbon monoxide detectors are going off. And I said, well, that's impossible. I said, do you have any, not thinking that the generator was on. And somehow that carbon monoxide worked its way, I guess, through the bottom of the top of the foundation, because it was the basement one that was going off, and that detector was picking up that carbon monoxide, which I thought was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, we have the most times we see that is if it's maybe early in the fall and we have a power outage for a storm or something, and it's still warm outside. People will fire up their generators, and the exhaust can go inside the windows and fill up the property with the exhaust and the carbon monoxide. Yeah. That's where we see that situation the most. But yeah, that's why it's important too, before you hook up any generators, that you make sure you have the proper connections and the proper distances. Yeah. Generally, I always tell people, if you can keep your generator 10 feet away at least, when I say 10, please make it 20.
Right.
Yeah, keep it far away, and you shouldn't have that problem. Yep.
I mean, I was amazed because, like I said, it was a windy day, and it was a sunny day, and the windows of the leaves were outside blowing around or whatever. And I'm saying to myself, how on earth is this stuff getting in? And of course, the basement detectors. I have a house that's an older house, so we had a basement unit, a battery operated unit in the basement, and that thing was going off. And I put 2 and 2 together, and I said, something, I bet you any money it's the generator. And I came home, I shut the thing down, and it stopped. I mean, it's crazy how that can work. So what are the basic differences between a commercial building? So like if you go into a commercial space, like a restaurant or something, what are their requirements, or what are the differences in requirements as compared to like a regular residential building?
So there's quite a bit of differences between commercial and residential. Commercial properties have fire code compliance for a lot of different reasons. It can get kind of complex. For instance, when you talk commercial property, you're talking anywhere between like a assembly occupancy, which would be a restaurant, or a manufacturing plant. So all these types of businesses or occupancies require different levels of protection. Yeah. Now, in most commercial properties, people aren't sleeping, but there could be a lot more people there. So they require different things. So yeah, there is a pretty major difference when it comes to that stuff, where the residential properties or single-family homes, two-family homes only require smoke alarms, where sometimes a commercial setting could require sprinklers and commercial fire alarms.
Wow. I got a thing from, I have Liberty Mutual Insurance, and they send these tips every once in a while, how, make life better for you or whatever. And I was reading one a couple of months ago, and they said, if you install a sprinkler system in your house, the fire policy, the annual premium would go down like by 35%. I mean, do you see anyone doing that really with a sprinkler system in a house?
We don't see many sprinklers inside these single families. Where we see it is in the group homes, where people may have trouble getting out on their own, and it takes a little longer. We'll see sprinkler systems. It hasn't caught up. There are certain areas of the country that is kind of popular.
Right.
And I think about 20 years ago, there was actually a big push in the fire service to require every home, new construction, to put sprinklers in it. And I agree with that. I mean, sprinklers are they work.
Right.
When the sprinklers are functioning properly, I don't know the statistics offhand, but I know you have a very better chance of survival under fire conditions with a sprinkler system. My only concern with that is maintenance of the system, because you could put a sprinkler system in tomorrow in your house, but if you don't maintain it and 10 years from now you need it and it doesn't work properly, then there's an issue.
Makes sense.
If someone's going to put a sprinkler system in their single family home or two family, that's great, but I just urge you to maintain that.
Wow. And I know, like, getting back to commercial real estate, when the Station nightclub changed a lot of the rules and regulations right around here, because when we were building our office, in front of the Lincoln Mall, that was around the time the Station nightclub happened, and we were still in the construction phase, and literally the code changed right in the middle of our construction, and I think we had to put in, I think it was 26 or 27 different types, pull boxes and heat detectors and exit light. It went from like 6 or 7 things to like 27 things. It was just amazing the change. Did you see that when that happened? The codes really tightened up.
They did. I think right after the Station nightclub fire, just like any tragedy, when it comes to everybody gets together and starts to think of what can we do to prevent this from happening again, and they look at everything and they figure out ways to protect people in these buildings to prevent any kind of tragedy like that again. Right after that happened, they actually said, I think Rhode Island was one of the strictest fire codes in the world. I think I remember hearing, which obviously had a lot of debate, but a lot of it I think needed to come down to educating the people and why we need to do these things. We had, not to get off the topic, but I wanted to kind of say this because I think it's important. Took a class in college. It was human-related fire behavior, and it was interesting what people do when these situations arrive. And one of the topics we discussed in this class was, what do people do when they hear the fire alarm? Do you know what they do?
No. What do they do?
In general, what people do is they actually look for more evidence of what's going on.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
So
to see if it's real.
To see if it's real.
Okay.
And then usually the second thought is what can I do to help? Now, what I tell everybody, and I teach this in the schools to the kids, I go out to the elderly complexes and even the business community. I tell them, actually, I don't want you to think about anything. I want you to get out of the building right away. As soon as you hear any kind of fire alarm or see it, especially if you see smoke, because time is of the essence. Fires burn a lot hotter and a lot faster than they do 30, 40, 50 years ago because of the synthetics they're putting in everything. I get the firefighters tell me all the time, hey, Brian, we went to this building and the people weren't evacuated. You got to go talk to those people. And I explained to them, well, that's actually the human behavior that goes on with that. And then I try to tell them, listen, we need, don't think about anything. Just get out. Help anybody in the media area that may need help. But yeah, don't go looking for the problem or try to figure it out.
Let the pros figure out where it's coming from and how to deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And even I know, these are difficult situations, obviously, in the middle of the night, your smoke alarms go off and you get up and you see something. I want you to get out, help the little kids get out and go to a spot where the fire truck will see you, tell everybody's out, and we'll worry about the fire. And I also I like to get this off because people are very, very attached to their pets, leave your pets. They have this natural instinct to get out on their own, and they're also lower to the ground than we are most of the time. So the firefighters can go and do their thing to help them. But I want to get that out there.
No, that's great. That's fantastic advice. And I would think too with the pets. If you I should say run out of the house, you shouldn't panic, but, leave the doors open or something on the way out. So if the pet is smart enough, the pet will follow you outside, right?
Yeah, well, that becomes tricky too. One of the other things that we're encouraging people to is to sleep at night with their doors closed and keep doors closed, because that will stop the spread of fire.
Okay.
But yeah, if it's a situation where you get out of the house and the pet sometimes will follow you. Sometimes, as we know, pets, they have a certain thing when they get scared too. Right. I've had people tell me that when my dog is afraid, he goes hides under the bed.
Right.
Yeah.
Mine used to go in the tub.
So a lot of people have different things that go on like that, and but we say, but that's good. Go outside and tell us where that pet is, and we'll go find them. That becomes, obviously, people are our first priority, but pets are right there with it. Right. And I could tell you, and I'll speak for every firefighter there is, we'd rather go try to rescue a pet than a person. So.
Absolutely. That's a great point about the pets being low to the ground as compared to us. You're buying time for that animal too. That gives you guys time to get in. Hopefully it's the response time is such where they can get there. Wow, this is great stuff. Well, we got 9 minutes left. Let's take one more commercial break, Brian, and we'll be right back.
Real Estate Pro Talk is a live radio talk show dedicated to educating its listeners on the entire spectrum of real estate matters. Part of the American dream is owning a home or investment property, or perhaps even becoming a real estate agent yourself. Paul Vanas and his team of real estate professionals have over 250 combined years of experience in the industry. In other words, we can make it happen for you. Why go down the road less traveled when we can put you directly on the real estate superhighway? Whether buying or selling in today's complicated real estate market, or if you just need advice about jumping into the real estate business for a career change, you'll need a decisive edge based on experience. Call Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144 for a free, no-obligation consultation. That's Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144.
And we are back to Real Estate Pro Talk. Still here with Brian Gartland, Fire Marshal from the North Smithfield Fire Department. Real estate tip number 2. It's really important for you to maintain your driveway. And I know this sounds kind of obvious, but they sell different products now that you can actually fill the cracks in your driveway yourself. And I'm not discouraging you from calling one of the driveway sealing companies. They do a real good job. But if you're on a limited budget, you can go to any big box store, hardware store, and buy the material to fill in the cracks in your driveway. And it's really easy to do. All you got to do is pour it in, let it set, and you use almost like a paint scraper to smooth it out. And it will add many years to an asphalt driveway. And then, of course, if you call the seal coat guys in the fall, you can't even tell that the crack was there after they seal coat the driveway. So you can get an extra 10, 15 years out of a driveway if you maintain it. So having said that, Brian, this has been great information. Now, maybe you can tell us, we're never going to get to everything I was planning on talking about today, so we got to get you back. That's going to be rule number 2. We'll have to get you back again. But can you give us a story or two that you know of about, the smoke detectors and how in your experience, how they've saved some people?
Well, we kind of actually touched on it, but you don't read about them in the paper, and you don't hear about them on the news. But yeah, they even if it's a small fire, we've seen situations where those smoke alarms have woken these people up or alerted them to the fire in the house or the CO issue in the house, and it really feels good, I think, when we get there and they're out of the house and that happened, And again, I don't think some people don't realize how important that was, but specific story. I'm just trying to be general here.
Do you ever go to a fire and respond to an emergency call and the people are standing out in the street, or do you got to go in there and, yank them out? I know it's like if you took someone like my father, he's gonna be battling this thing on his own in there. Do you have to go in there and get those types of people? Say, hey, look, guy, you come with us, let us take care of the problem. Do you get those at all? Or?
Yeah, we've had situations like that. Absolutely. I mean, I can remember one alarm we went to where it came in. It was one of our apartment buildings, so we got the call right away, and we went out, and the fire started in the bathroom and inside a laundry basket, and it was protected with the fire alarm and the sprinklers, and the sprinkler knocked the fire down before it got too far.
Really?
And the smoke alerted everybody in the building of the fire,
Yep.
and everything just went the way it's supposed
So
to.
they work. The technology
Yeah,
worked.
it
Wow.
was excellent. Matter of fact, the sprinkler head's no good any longer, so I grabbed that and I put it on my desk down in
Really?
my office. Yeah,
Wow.
so
There's
makes it all worth it.
There's a YouTube video that I don't know, my son sent me or whatever. It was just recently. Maybe you saw it on TV. These people had an ironing board set up in their living room, and I guess it was like a 1-bedroom efficiency apartment. And the dog jumped up on the ironing board, and it was they had a video camera in the house. It was almost a security system, and I guess the dog knocked over the ironing board, and you could see the fire start. And the people weren't home. I guess they went out somewhere, and they left the flat iron on, and the dog jumped on this ironing board. Do you see pets? You know, I know my father always said he would never allow a candle to be lit in the house for that reason. And, you know, the cat jumps up on the thing, and do you see much of that with the pets?
Well, I mean, I don't see it. We don't see that on a daily basis, but yes, we've had situations, and since I've been there, that pets contributed to the spread of the fire. Yeah, but yeah, once in a great while, you do see something like that. That's why you're right, candle. That's another good tip there. You know, candles are very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
I can't tell everybody to not use candles because people have been using them for years.
Especially
and
on Valentine's Day, guys, right?
Yeah. Or birthdays, right?
Right.
Every year I get more candles on my cake, but so yeah, use candles with caution. They're extremely dangerous. We see a lot of fires with candles.
Yeah. I have a firefighter relative. He's got a fireplace in his house, and he won't burn a regular fire in it. He buys those logs over at Super Stop and Shop. They're those fireplace logs,
Yep.
and that's all he burns in the thing, because he will not light a fire in the fireplace for that. You know, because I guess when you're seeing this stuff all day long, you really become aware. So do you see the public, grabbing onto this, and I know people resist change and whatnot, but do you see the public finally accepting this, saying, hey, look, this is the way it is, this is the way it should be, these really do save lives? Or are they kind of like fighting you on it?
So I would have to say that I am one of the luckiest fire marshals around. I work in a community where I could tell you that it is a high percentage of the businesses and the people who live in that community are on board, and together we make it a safe community. They really are. All the business owners in town, I mean, they are excellent. They not only do they abide by everything, they ask what they can do extra to make it to work. They call all the time asking for help and what we can do to make things safer. So I am very lucky. And I appreciate that. So my shout out will be to all the business owners and even any property owner that I've dealt with over the years. I've had very minimal problems. So I'm very happy over there.
That's great.
Obviously there's always some resistance when it comes to change, but yes, now that we're quite a few years into this, after the station fire and the change of the fire codes to the national, the NFPA and all that. Yeah, people are on board. Wow. They really are.
That's great.
And and the same thing with the realtors that I work with all throughout town. They're excellent to work with. Yeah. I learn a lot from the realtor folks. We work well together.
That's great. Well, we got about a minute left, Brian. You want to give the audience your contact information and for more information on the subject?
Sure. So residents in North Smithfield, you can call me with any kind of information, fire codes, questions, residential, commercial. My phone number is 401-762-1135. I'm there Monday through Thursday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you for coming in today. Of course, we have the utmost respect for everyone in the fire service. You guys put your life on the line for us every single day, and it doesn't go unappreciated. Let me tell you. Like I said, it takes a special type of person to put on an outfit and run into a fire instead of running away from it. So we all thank you for that. So having said that, thank you for listening to Real Estate Pro Talk. We'll be back next week. And, of course, go on YouTube if you want to hear this episode again under Real Estate Pro Talk. Thank you, and we'll talk to you next week.